Yeah, I've got you now. How you doing, James? You all right?
Yeah, I'm well, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Just too much going on. Not enough time in the day to do it all, but we're all good.
Well, I've had, August is always a bit turbulent, isn't it? Whether it's yourself or other people, and if they've got kids of a certain age, and then you're like, suddenly at September is like, shit, I am chasing a tail here.
I know. Well, I'm looking forward to normality and the kids going back to school on Wednesday.
Is that right? Yeah, my wife's a secondary school teacher.
Yeah.
So she went back this morning, but I think from their point of view, it was like, okay, it's quite nice. They've got 2 days to acclimatise without the youth appearing.
Yeah, I think one's back tomorrow, the other one's back on Wednesday. I'm not quite sure which way around it is. Fortunately, my wife knows what's going on because I haven't got a clue.
That's good. That's good. But how was Morzine? Was it nice?
Oh yeah, it's like we love it. I've got a friend with an apartment there, so we quite often have some time over there. So yeah, unfortunately, so I've had a run training camp, and then I needed to be back, so we only had like 8 days there. And we normally try and get 2 weeks, and so it just wasn't long enough with the traveling and everything else. But
Yes.
it's a brilliant environment. We didn't bother taking mountain bikes this year, which I think I only got out on the road bike twice.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would. The weather was okay. I think we had sort of 2 rain days, which is always a bit of a pain. But you know what? It's just, even then, there's just so much to do. So it's I'm not complaining.
Oh, lovely. Lovely. Well, Garry, I won't keep you. And as ever, thank you in advance for your time. And yeah, that's cool about the content. Like I said,
Yeah.
it's for rouleur.
Yeah.
I've been doing a regular gig for a while, tends to be performance based. A lot of it might be sort of what the pros do and then how you assimilate it to recreational. This isn't particularly, but it's digital. So I'm never entirely sure of their timeline.
That's fine.
I think what tends to happen is when you have like a grand tour where they really go for it, everything else goes on the back burner. So I'm aiming to send this to them this week.
Yeah.
I suspect it won't appear until the Welter's finished, but
that's fine. And it's bizarre because actually I've got a little elite runner that I'm doing a little bit with. I've known her for years, but actually she just gone out to Florida on a scholarship about 10 days ago.
wow.
She came third at European champs under 20s over 1500 meters. So she's a pretty quick lass.
Yeah.
Last week her parents collared me and said, "Oh, can you help her out with nutrition?" And it was just literally, we did and these days with technology, and it's brilliant. So as you see, I use Fathom. It now records all my calls, gives me a transcript, gives me points of action, everything like that. So it's just great because I can talk to you without having to think about scribbling notes down, what have you, and go back to the transcript. And I've been using it a lot with sales, but now just by default, every time I jump on a call, it's there. And so I came off a sort of a 35-40 minute call with her on Saturday, which was like, to be honest, it wasn't giving her a huge amount of content. It was giving her more homework. But what are you facing with humidity? She's now, because she's in Florida, her morning runs, she meets at 6:15 in the morning. So what can she do about breakfast? So they've done DEXA scans and everything else like that with her. But she's now got a canteen that's just like it's almost like a 5-star hotel that you walk in, and it's all you can eat whenever you want it, sort of thing. So it's just like, but they don't regulate what the athletes eat. The athletes are left to do, what they want to. So again, it's like, I want to put a massive amount of weight on, but she wants to make sure she's eating properly. And so, so we basically had a 40-minute call, which was giving her a whole load of homework. And it's like, I've come up with some really great content on this 40-minute call. And I've spoken to her and I said, "Look, do you mind if I snip it up the 40-minute call and just get 3 or 4 minutes worth of us talking about content? I want you to go and do this. I want you to, that I can then put out on social media." She said, "Yeah, no problems at all." Because, politely, it's her way of paying me. And had I not had that call with Iz on Saturday, I would have quite happily picked up the phone to you today, had 20-30 minutes on the call to you, to James, and gone, "Oh, great," and not done anything more with it. But if I can, and if we're sort of, we'll cut and we'll restart this properly in a moment. But if I can, once you've gone live, I can go, "Hey, I had this great discussion with James from rouleur." Now, it might be that we put the whole of the, 20-30 minutes on out on YouTube. But again, if I could just snip it some 15 to 3 minute bits of content, but I go,
Yeah.
this is my advice to rouleur,
Yeah.
and tag us both. Well, works for everyone.
No, absolutely. God, you're so modern, Garry. You're so modern. No, absolutely, and especially these. Whenever I interview the protagonists, as you probably know before, most of it will be my words, and I'm integrating quotes, but obviously, and then I might be adding studies or two, depending on the nature of the feature. But but that's all good. That's all good. And
should we get started then?
Yeah, so it's pretty formulaic, really. It's as per contact, really, it's sort of maybe the major metrics, whether it's VO2 max, anaerobic threshold, the ones that matter in cycling, perhaps the ones which people think matter, but maybe don't matter as much as they think they matter. And then following the same template, really, of like I put on the message, like, what is it? Why is it important? How does that relate to performance? And can you test it? And I guess which time of the year you might be focusing more on that metric than others. So I guess over to you if that's a good place to start, Garry.
No, and that's cool. And I think it's always nice to do stuff for you and the likes of rouleur and what have you. And it's just nice to get that bit of content and understanding out in a way that we don't put across normally. And it's harder to get that understanding out. I think for me, and you know me well, James, I look at everything as a bespoke, personalized view.
Yeah.
So if you're coming to me as a cyclist and you're saying, what, Garry, are the critical measurements? The first question back to you is like, well, what are we trying to achieve? Because if you're a mountain biker that's racing, national point series and you're racing for 2 hours, your needs are completely different from somebody that's going to go and do a 10-mile time trial, or somebody that's doing a local road race, or an athlete that's going to go and do a sportive.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that I look at. I don't just call you a cyclist. I go, right, what are we trying to achieve with you? Now, the big one, you've mentioned it already, VO2 max is absolutely crucial. Now, it doesn't matter whether we're talking, again, the world at the moment is great. Whether I'm talking to you about performance and cycling, or whether I'm talking to you about health, well-being, and longevity, we know that VO2 max is one of the most trainable metrics, and it is absolutely crucial in terms of performance, but it's also the number one indicator of health, well-being, and longevity. So actually, again, if I'm coming away from the elite athlete and I'm talking to the rouleur reader who is, I'm cycling because I love cycling, but actually I'm looking at the cycling as an output to improve my health metrics. VO2 max is the essential one. Okay.
And that is important. Sorry, Garry, to interrupt. Yeah, like you said, this is aimed at amateurs, but I know from speaking to folk before, it's more about the elite, and they're like, oh, VO2 max isn't that important. It's like, well, that's because the athletes you're dealing with all have a VO2 max. So they're saying it's not that important. It's like, yeah, but they all tend to be over 70, 75 or whatever.
And so, again, it depends on the hierarchy of who I'm talking to. So, again, I'm really lucky. I've got the likes of little Max Greensnell coming in and seeing me, and he's off in Leger this weekend, mountain bike, champs. So it was one of the and Max comes in on a semi-regular basis. And what we do, we check his VO2 max, and we check his training zones, and we see where threshold is, where anaerobic threshold is, and effectively when we come VT1, LT1, where aerobic peak. So he knows that his training zones are where they need to be, and we can send him off in the right direction. In addition to that, we also look at body statistics, body composition. So height, weight, muscularity, body fat, body water. And you start to build a picture up of an athlete. So again, it's like, what do we test? Well, we test as much as we possibly can, but it's like what's relevant to the individual that we're talking to, and what's necessary with the individual that we're talking to. So, it's, as I say, VO2 max to me is critical. Now, again, I can go back and talk to you about my days when I was doing my PhD in Cape Town. And, remember, I left Cape Town in 1996. I finished my PhD in 96. So long time ago. 1995, we had World Cross Country Championships in Cape Town, And Professor Tim Noakes, being who he was, managed to pull quite a few of the Kenyan international runners in to the lab to do some studies with them. And there was some genetic studies, and it was a lady called Adele Weston that was doing the studies. At the time, James, I was running a 10K in around 32 minutes flat, and I wasn't quick enough. I wasn't quick enough to make the cut for the white athletes in terms of doing a black African, Kenyan versus a white. I wasn't fast enough to make the cut. But what we found with those guys, and this is why the pros don't consider necessarily VO2 max to be important, because at the pro level, and the difference was the Kenyans and the white Africans had a VO2 max that was almost identical, but the Kenyans were able to hold a lactate threshold, anaerobic threshold, VT2, whatever you call it, a very, very high percentage of that VO2 max. And once the white athletes were there at the same VO2 max, the percentage that anaerobic threshold, that FTP for the cyclist was considerably lower. And so that's the nuance between, right, well, that's perhaps why for an elite athlete, when you've got a VO2 max 75, 80 into the low 80s, the VO2 max isn't necessarily going to be the be all and the end all. And so again, we look at VO2 max in two different ways. We look at VO2 max as the raw capacity to bring oxygen in. So VO2 max is considered to be the highest amount of oxygen that you can bring in and utilize over a 1 minute period. We then look at it relative to your body weight. So again, for an endurance athlete, it's that relative score. So we divide it down by body weight. So it's like having two cars that have both got 3 litre engines in it. Okay. So the 3 litres is the VO2 max. In athlete terms, it's 5-6 litres, but in terms of a car, we use a 3 litre. Now, what we then do is divide that down by body weight, because you can have both of the same absolute VO2 max, but if one's got a higher relative because there's less weight they're carrying around, again, that's got a bigger impact on performance. It's got a bigger impact on health. It's got a bigger impact on longevity. So it's about looking at things from a relative point of view. Now, again, what we can look at is we can look at efficiency. So, it's all well and good saying, I can bring in this amount of oxygen, but it's then how do we deliver that amount of oxygen? So again, going back to that Kenyan example, the Kenyans were able to run faster for the same amount of oxygen uptake because they were far more efficient. So as a cyclist, if I'm sitting along and doing, let's say, 270 watts, 280 watts and 40 Ks an hour, fine. But how much oxygen am I using? Or what's my power output related to my oxygen uptake? So how efficient am I? So again, the more that we can drill down into these numbers, and we've all seen them, we've either driven behind them or we cycle behind them. The bloke, the Statling bike that's thrashing from side to side that looks like a water that's flopping all over the place. Not an efficient cyclist. If you were talking to me now, when you can see me on video and I'm a pro athlete, my legs could be putting out 300 plus watts and my upper body's totally still. I'm not doing anything. I'm working from a good solid core. I'm needing to suck in that oxygen, but everything's stable, everything's strong. So again, it's looking at how efficient am I? So from that oxygen uptake, how much power can I produce? From that power output, what's my heart rate doing? So again, it's starting to try and pull apart a whole load of metrics. So whilst VO2 max is key, it's what percentage of that VO2 max can I hold at FTP, anaerobic threshold? And it's where my aerobic base is. So again, if I looked at you, for example, if you're an all-dax rider and you're going to go and do something daft like parry, breast parry, you're going to sit on your bike for, however many hours, days. Right, no problems at all. But I generally find an all-dax rider will be able to hold a very, very high percentage of that aerobic base, but from an aerobic point of view, but will have a very, very low anaerobic tolerance. They're not used to sprinting. They're not used to attacking. They're not used to jumping. Whereas your mountain biker at the other end of the spectrum, although they're racing 2 hours, are used to going attack, recover, attack, recover, attack, recover. So again, they've got a massive anaerobic tolerance. So we've got to now fine tune the engine for what the athlete needs. So, we're starting to look at, what elements play a role in terms of our performance. And it's like, it's those basic numbers that we've all heard about. So FTP is great, but FTP in isolation doesn't either tell us what's above that, what capacity we've got above that FTP to our maximum capacity, or where our aerobic base sits below it before we hit our FTP. So, I do have politely a bit of a problem with some of the training platforms that only look at FTP or are based our training on FTP. Because again, you can be a 10-mile time trial rider that can tolerate lactate coming out your ears for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But try and get you to go and ride a 4-hour steady ride. You haven't got a decent aerobic base.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, you can have a tester that can be 85, 90 kilos, can put out a small amount of, a massive amount of power, punches a very, very small hole in the air. As soon as you try and get that guy to ride uphill, they've gone backwards because we're now not considering power to weight at threshold. We're just looking at a pure threshold. So there are so many nuances about what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
What are the key and critical factors in trying to help our athlete, perform? So for me, it always comes back to, there's an absolute myriad of metrics that we want to look at. VO2 max, functional threshold power, anaerobic threshold, aerobic based fitness. Those are the three that I'm going to measure in the lab. Based on, rather than guesstimates, based on what the Garmin's telling me or my smartwatch is telling me. And there was a study out about the last 3 or 4 days that I've seen that suggests that your smartwatch typically underestimates VO2 in trained athletes by about 6%.
Right. Okay. Significant amount.
And that's without the outliers. That's looking at, okay, here's that range of, but actually we get a huge amount of outlier, but actually it's tending to typically underestimate anyway.
Presumably, Gary, sorry to interrupt, if it's 6% out with elite athletes who must use the smartwatch or the watch more than an amateur athlete, I'm not asking you to speculate, but I can speculate that presumably for amateur athletes, that figure could actually be even higher because Garmin's working with less data or whichever.
Yeah, well, I think Garmin probably consider they're working with more data for a non-elite athlete because they've got more non-elite athletes that wear their Garmin.
Oh, the actual, yes.
But but you're right. It's and again, there's a whole load of extrapolations they use to generate that data. So they'll go, what's the 5K time? What's the 10-mile time trial time? How long? And they'll use it to guesstimate backwards. But again, that takes no understanding of efficiency of a run.
Yeah.
We can say as an elite runner, yes, you should be running at such and such a VO2 or cycling at such and such a VO2 for the speed that you're putting out. But actually, if you're flapping around and, your bike fit's not great or your run mechanics are poor, that's going to have a major, major impact on those algorithms. And so, they serve a purpose, but again, it's assess, don't guess. Don't just take the metrics that we're getting from a smartwatch or your phone or what have you. If your training is important to you, assess where you need to be. And that comes sort of almost full circle back to your next question is, well, how often should you get these things assessed? If we're just talking about wellness and longevity, probably annually, once a year. Just check that your fitness is going in the right level. The elite athletes, and I don't have one here in front of me, as I work an awful lot with VO2 Master. The elite athletes will use VO2 Master for training sessions once or twice a week, and they will look at maximal metrics probably every 3 to 4 weeks. So they would do an assessment of what's going on at least monthly to get a really key understanding of what's going on. Now, again, alongside of that, something else that we can measure is we can look at resting metabolic rate, how many calories your body needs at rest to make sure that you're fueling properly to either maintain, gain, or lose weight. So again, another metric that we can assess that probably should be assessed on a regular basis. As a non-elite athlete, I'd say you probably want to assess every 3 to 4 months. And you would do it at key training times. So again, we're sat here at the start of autumn. Now, for me, I'm looking at most of my athletes, and the start of October is probably when the major races are all over. So, I've got people running Berlin Marathon. I've got, one of the duathlon national champs is coming up at the start of October. We've got stuff like Ironman Wales. So for a lot of athletes, we're now coming to end of season. It's the start of the cyclocross season. It's the end of the mountain bike season. So for me, a lot of my athletes are coming to end of season. I'd give them a week or two easy training. They go, right, we're now going to do an assessment so that we make sure that your training zones are right to take us through our winter training. So September, October, November should be the time that we do sort of almost our first assessment of the year. Okay.
Yeah.
You come off summer fitness. We get an understanding of where you are from summer fitness, and we go, right, are your training zones set up right now to take us over the winter period?
Okay. So that first, regarding the testing then, Garry, it's the ideal is to hit a lab, presumably, or like you said, the VO2 master. So via universities, via yourself. I mean,
so I mean, look, the nice thing is there are more and more people now offering fitness testing. You know, I've obviously got 25 years of experience of doing it. I've written, you know, a couple of books on fitness training, coaching, and all that stuff. So yeah, come to me, please. It'd be lovely. But you know, I have lots of competition out there, and that's not a problem. I can't look after everybody in the world. It's great now that fitness testing is becoming far more accessible, either for people to go to a venue, whether that's a gym, a health club, a university, you know, someone that specifically, you know, I know a couple of places that do bike fit and do VO2 max testing. So, you know, it's seek out somebody that understands you as an athlete and can give you that data and that metrics. And it's going to give you the first line of attack to make sure that the time that you're spending training is not wasted. Again, in my coaching book, you know, I've got a great metric that people that
Garry, you've frozen.
Okay, so have you, James. Are you back yet? Am I back? James?
You're back. You're back. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened there. I missed that last 20 seconds or so.
You froze as well. So no, I think where I was I was saying, you know, the nice thing is, you know, there are a whole load of people that are now offering fitness testing.
Okay, yeah.
But go to somewhere that understands you as a cyclist. You know, so rather than and it might not be wrong, but you know, rather than going to a high-end gym that offers VO2 max testing that's going to compare you to a high rocks athlete, for example, you're a cyclist.
Yeah.
Go to somewhere that understands cyclists and understands those cycling metrics. So again, you know, there are places out there that do bike fit and VO2 max testing. Okay, come to Sportstest would be absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
But you know, I can't service everybody, but you know, I'd like to say I'm good at what I do. But when I look at stuff that, for example, in my cycling book, looking at athletes that are training blind, just going out and doing a ride blind, and we look at their heart rate profile over, you know, a 2-hour ride, as much as 70% of that training time can be wasted because it's spent in the wrong training zone. So, you know, if you've only got 4 to 6 hours to train this week, and you're wasting 70% of your time, that's a huge loss. So it's really, again, important to me that you assess where your training zones are and you use them properly. And again, you know, there's another little thing that I use, which is, you know, are you training or are you exercising? Are you cycling? Because if you're just going out and cycling for the fun of it, not a problem at all.
Yeah.
But don't at the end of, and again, you know, I think I've got a pretty good handle of who reads Rouleur. You know, they're fairly avid cyclists.
Yeah.
You know, they've got a target in mind. You know, they want to hear what the pros are doing, but they're going to rock up at an event and we'll say, whether that's a sports eve, whether it's a road race, whether it's a time trial, they're going to want to rock up and do the best that they can possibly do during that event. And that's where we've now got to say, are you actually training or are you just riding your bike?
Yeah. Okay.
And riding your bike serves a purpose, but it doesn't give us that focus and that direction that we need in order to take your fitness and your performance forward. And really, that's what I try and get the individuals that I work with to understand, is that let's take you to that next level by giving you a training plan that's bespoke, that's specific to you, that looks at your fitness, that looks at your physiology, that looks at your all-round needs. And as I say, you know, so if you came into the lab at Sportstest, we'd start off, and the first thing we do is we jump you on our very fancy scales. We do a height, a weight, a full body composition. We look at muscularity, we look at body water, we look at cell health, we look at a whole lot of stuff. And I do that with everybody that walks through the door.
Okay.
The next thing that we could potentially do, but we don't do with every single athlete, is then we'd then look at a resting metabolic rate. We'd look at understanding a measurement that tells me how many calories do you need for the training that you're doing and your lifestyle. So by getting an understanding of that, are we feeding you appropriately to make sure that you're recovering in the way that we want to, with the knowledge of the body composition? Oh, look, I've got X amount of fat to lose, or my muscularity is not good enough, or I've got a muscular imbalance, or my hydration is not good enough. We can now start saying, right, these are the calories, and let's target that for your lifestyle, for the training that you do, so we can match that. And then we put you into a performance test, and it goes through the whole of those metrics. We're looking at power output, we're looking at heart rate, we're looking at oxygen uptake, we're looking at efficiency. And we're really trying to determine where's your peak aerobic fitness. So where you should be doing your zone 2 training, rather than stick a finger in the sky and guessing, oh, it should be around such and such. No, what's the target zones, power output, heart rate for your zone 2 training? Where's that FTP? Not from you going and battering yourself in a 20-minute Zwift race or riding a 10-mile time trial, but actually, where does your body observe those changes taking place? What's going on at peak? So what's your peak power output? What's your VO2 max? What's your power to weight ratio? Then we'll look at your recovery aspects. I'm also looking at that from a heart rate power, from a VO2 point of view, but I've got some really fancy bits of kit that look at blood flow in the muscle as well. So we can look at what muscle oxygenation's doing. So we've got a true picture of you. It's like taking, for me at this time of the year, it's taking an athlete, giving them a full MOT and saying, these are where your strengths and weaknesses are. This is where you're likely to break down. Let's set you up your winter plan. From setting you that winter plan, I can now build your training and take your training forward. And it might be, January, it might be February time, but we'd look at what where your key races were, and we go, right, 2, 3, 4 months time, let's reassess. Let's check that base phase has done what it needs to. And again, I've got athletes coming back to me and going, hey, look, Garry, I'm dropping my body weight. Brilliant stuff. I mean, I had a cyclist in with me 3 or 4 days ago. I used to coach him years ago. Haven't seen him for a while. Came in 5 weeks ago. In the last 5 weeks, he's dropped 5 kilos of weight. Now, what we've then done is we've then assessed and gone, actually, and I'll tell you his name, Duncan. Duncan, you've lost 4 kilos of fat, but you've lost 1 kilo muscle. Right.
Okay.
That then tells me the balance between training, recovery, and nutrition are just off slightly. And so I now can implement, right, what do I need to do? And with the previous assessment, we've focused on his fitness. We've focused on implementing better zone 2, doing more zone 2 work. And it's like, now we need to make sure your recovery nutrition smartens up, so that we can now, on the next set of testing, see that those metrics are taking us forward. So how often an athlete does this testing is really dependent on what's their outcomes that they want. So generally, I would have someone in the lab maybe monthly to do a reassessment of body composition and give us that overview of whether it's working. But it would probably be 8 to 16 weeks for a full VO2 max and a full assessment. So, just constantly touching base, reviewing, seeing what someone's going on.
And core to that, Garry, presumably is the zones, the training zones, to make sure they're as accurate as possible. I guess then tied in with that, it's like, okay, if we could just give a rough overview of, you do your first test this month, maybe the start of next month, you're looking forward to the winter, say it's a keen, sportive rider, whatever they've got at the tab. Can you just give us a brief idea of, okay, what should be maybe your main goal of the next 2 or 3 months with that information? Like you said, is it a lot of zone 2 work to build that aerobic capacity?
Very much so. I'm just scribbling myself a little note here, because March, April, May, June, July. So if we were looking at, major sporty focus July. So start of July, whether it's the Etap, whether it's the marathon, or whether it's the Marmot. Those are the 3 key ones on the the spectrum. Again, what I would do is I work backwards, and it sounds daft, but I go, what's the end goal that you're trying to achieve? Let's work backwards from there. So I'd have the last 2 to 3 weeks in there of being a taper phase, bringing the performances down, making sure the athlete's fit, firing, and ready to go. That would probably give me a 6 to 8 week phase, and depending on the level of the athlete, probably 4 to 6 weeks ago. So May, June, I'll probably be wanting to put some speed and power work in if they're looking to hit performances at the top end of that. If they're more of, I want to just get round, I want to make sure I can survive, get up some of the major climbs that we're going to be facing, I might skip over that speed to power phase. Because that's, again, that for me would be a phase that the road racer, the mountain biker wants, that ability to snap, that ability to jump, that ability to keep going bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
But if you're riding sportive, you don't need to be doing that. But again, just having that little bit of extra muscular strength might give you some confidence. So, again, it might be we'd have an April, May, June phase where we're really focusing predominantly on threshold, predominantly on that ability to improve anaerobic threshold, get up the climb, reduce body weight down so that we're climbing as well as possible, which now would give me a 6 or 7 month phase where I'm working on building as much aerobic base as I possibly can.
Okay.
If we're out, and you're doing, I don't know, the Marmot, and you're looking to be, a good solid 8 hours, and I've always thought about Marmot as almost like 2 hours for each of the major climbs. You could do the first in 2, the next in 2, the next in 2, 8 hours for the Marmot. It's a good solid time. It's not right at the sharp end, but there'd be a lot of good club riders that go, oh, if I can get near 8 hours, I'm happy with that. And that's including neutralized. So we'd break it down and go, well, you're riding for 8 hours. We need the best endurance base that you possibly can have. You've just got to be able to keep going. And again, if I'm working with someone, I've got quite a few of my guys that do stuff like the loop, which is the entire loop of the Tour de France, which is done a week before, the pro riders do it. So again, it's all about building that endurance. Now, someone might have a phase where September, October, November, they have a bit of a down phase. So I'm not riding so much. I'm just going to. So it all depends on what the athlete needs, but we're still left with December, probably through to March, as being a really, really clear zone 2. Let's build endurance. Let's build as much aerobic base as possible. Let's get as much fat metabolism as we possibly can, that you're just really, really comfortable sitting on the bike. What scares me is where people knock on my door in March time and go, oh, Garry, I've got the Etap in 3.5 months' time. You go, oh, great. I've not been doing anything over the winter. It's like, right, okay. Because this, for me, that October through to March phase is where you're effectively layering down as much of a foundation for your following season as possible. And we just continue to track. If you can improve someone's aerobic base, someone's zone 2 training, and they've suddenly gone from 160 watts up to 200 watts at zone 2, well, everything else on top of that's going up without even touching it.
Yes, I see. Okay.
And whilst there are strategies that we can improve threshold over 4 to 6 weeks, and different coaches, and you look at Carmichael, you do a lot of high intensity short, that will bring someone's pure peak power up. It ain't going to help out their endurance a huge amount, and it's not going to give them that long sustainable foundation. And I think, personally, one of the things that my wife always says is like, get me 4 to 6 weeks of training, and suddenly I've jumped a massive amount, because I'm continually just tapping away at doing the base work. Even if I'm not doing a huge amount, it's like taking the dog out for, a walk, hour and a half. It's doing low endurance stuff wherever I can. And then suddenly when I switch into sort of needing to be race mode, boom, suddenly I can, jump that, because I'm working from a great solid foundation. If you overlook the foundation side of things, you overlook that efficiency, you overlook that aerobic base work, you're creating problems for yourself.
Cool. So that's great, Garry. And there's loads there. So I would just say, I'm aware that I'm a tight ass, so I haven't paid for Zoom. So I've only got about 5 minutes.
Oh, right. Yeah. We've got 6 minutes to go.
Okay. So really then, how might that sort of manifest itself in training coming up? Say someone's roughly got, I don't know, 6 to 10 hours. That might be their average. Is it everything easy? Bearing in mind, I guess it's going to get colder, more people indoor training.
And again, that's politely the nightmare of Zwift. Zwift is brilliant. It's a brilliant training tool, but it causes too many athletes to race the whole time where they shouldn't be. I don't have a problem with an athlete doing a Zwift race once or twice a week. Not an issue whatsoever. But don't turn every training session into a race.
Yeah.
I would still look at 70-30, 60-40 rule, whereas actually if 60 or 70% of your training time can be done at zone 2, at the right zone 2, rather than perceived zone 2, not what your Garmin or your Polar or, you know, Training Peaks has told you, but an assessed, this is where my zone 2 actually is.
Yeah.
You know, it makes a phenomenal difference. You know, that if you get that 4 to 6 hours done of good zone 2, almost, and you know, my simple, so if you pick up my book, it's in my book, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, anything from 60 minutes to 2 hours of zone 2 on each of those days. That's your core framework. Then Wednesday can be a Zwift race, an unstructured ride, a very easy recovery ride, whatever you need it to be, intervals, whatever you want, sufferfest session, don't care.
Yeah.
Sunday then is, I'm going to go out for a long ride on the mountain bike, I'm going out for a long ride with the club, and whether we're going to rip each other's legs off or where we're just going to make it nice and social and cafe ride, it's not a problem because we've already done 60% of our week on the riding that we need to.
Yeah.
But it comes back to the whole point of making sure that the 60% of the ride is done at the right level for you. And that then, you know, 6, 8, 10 weeks on, you're reassessing and going, has this block of training actually worked for me? Yes, it has. Brilliant. Fabulous. What do I now need to do to layer onto this? No, it hasn't. What have I done wrong? Have I actually been using my zones properly? Have I looked after my recovery? Have I looked after my sleep? Have I looked after my hydration? Have I looked after my nutrition? You know, it's then pulling in all the other bits and going, right, I've done this block of training. Has it worked in the way I wanted to? Yeah, great, brilliant. Tick, I can carry on. No, it hasn't. What do I now need to smarten up to make sure that it does work, rather than just riding your bike blindly the whole time? And you know what? Riding your bike blindly is better than sitting on your ass on the sofa for 10 hours a week. But actually, you could use that training time far more effectively and fast forward your fitness ability by training smartly.
Brilliant. Garry, that's splendid. One actually quick clarification is, obviously we're talking zones. We like power meter is preferable over just training by heart rate?
No, see, I'm still a heart rate fan and I have been for years. And there are issues with power meters as well. I think you need to use both. And I think it's absolutely essential that we use both. And just something just popped up on my screen that I didn't need. It's essential that you use both. But I prioritize heart rate over power, particularly for doing our steady zone 2 work. The problem is, and it goes in both directions. The problem is if you're only focusing on power output, let's say I've given you a power zone this week of, James, I want you to sit between 150 and 170 watts. In 3 to 4 weeks' time, when you're fitter and stronger and you're still sitting at 150 to 170, your heart rate's now 10 beats lower. You're not working as hard and you're still hitting the zone, but you're now working easier than you should be. Whereas if I'm giving you a heart rate zone and I want you to sit at, let's say, 140 to 150 heart rate, and you're putting out 150 watts, in 4 to 6 weeks' time, you should be hitting out 165, 170 watts for that same heart rate.
I see. Yes.
And in the same way, if you're chasing a power output and you're getting fatigued, you will struggle to elevate your heart rate. So again, there's, you know, the nuances are, we've got to look at both, but it's which we prioritize. And on our zone 2 training, I am still a fan of looking at heart rate over power output, but I think we need to look at both.
Perfect. Garry, that's tremendous. There's plenty there. Anything else you'd like to add? I know it's a big area. I think now we've chatted, I think it's going to be more of a focus on that upcoming time. You know, the importance of the fitness testing now, or ahead of when you're committed to a block. Sort of thing. Like you said, I guess it's that time where certainly in October people might take a little time off.
But for me, it should be, we've got a picture now where we're end of season. So you should be in fairly good shape. You know, we're coming off, the weather's still vaguely okay. So you're coming off some good road miles, should be in relatively good shape. This will give us a picture about where we are now, what we need to do to be at this point next summer, but better. And it will give us clarity about where those training zones are. So, you know, realistically, a September, October fitness assessment sets you really in great shape for next June, July time. Rather than waiting until next March.
Brilliant. Garry, that's tremendous. Thank you so much. As ever, jolly appreciated. I'll be working on this. To be honest, I won't be coming back to this till tomorrow afternoon. I'm, like I said, chasing tail with other bits. But I'll shout when it's up on Roulette.
And shout if you've got any questions, James.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, Garry.
Speak soon.
Catch up, mate. Thanks for your time as ever. Cheers.
No problem. Bye-bye.
Bye.